Cool.
Got lots of cameras off. Don't be shy.
Don't turn them on if you would. If you feel comfortable with it. So we're going to get started. And is it great? So welcome to Coaching Agile Journeys. I'm not going to share my slides today. We're just going to wing it, and we are going to just talk. So for those of you who it might be your first time, we're just a group of volunteers that came together for, gosh, is it 3 and something years now? And we just had people talk about their experiences, and we just realized we became more and more passionate about sharing with the wider community. And so Coaching Agile Journeys was born, and over time we've grown to support other things like the open movement. So if you're interested in the open movement, go to openleadershipnetwork.com. You can register for any of our events. In case you weren't aware, coachingagiljourneys.com, and all the past events are also there. So if you missed one, please go back and view some of the past events. Tweet at us if you wish. And so we do all this on our own time and money. So it'd be great to support us. Click buy us some coffee on our website and donate to the cause to keep these events going. And I'm also, one more thing before I turn over to Dan Vacanti, is coming August 13th at noon Eastern Time, Utah X Team will come and talk about the hidden power of organizational open space. So we're partnering with Open Leadership Network, and we're bringing Utah here to talk about that, and that should be a really amazing talk also. So I am going to turn it over to Dan, and thank you so much. We saw your talk at Lean Agile US, and I knew this was one of the things. It's like, come on here and share what you just said with the wider community. So thank you so much.
No, certainly my pleasure. I was very happy to get the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you everybody else for joining. We were talking before we got started. My preference, honestly, is to keep this next hour fairly informal. So I don't know if everybody has seen in the chat window, we have a link to Slido. If anybody has any specific questions that they would like to see asked and or answered, you can ask them. I'm not going to promise that I will answer everything. But I'd much rather make this hour about the things that you guys want to talk about. This hour is yours. So I mean, I can maybe start going through the slides, but honestly, my preference would be to have have more of a conversation. Just so you know, and I'm just going to apologize up front here. The person who helped me to come up with this, I shouldn't say help. He did all the work, and I just took all the credit. His name is Pratik Singh. Pratik is here as well. So you can see we're actually at a company called Ultimate Software, the company where the magic happens, right? Where all this stuff kind of got dreamed up, where we're really kind of able to test out some of these things. And so I'll do, if it's okay with everybody, I'll do some shameless plugs on some other things that we're doing maybe at the end of the talk. So so again, yeah, thanks everybody for being here. If I want to present slides, what do I do?
There should be a share button at the bottom of your Zoom window.
Got it.
And then you can actually pick the slides of the desktop.
We need it. I'm sure they need all of them.
All right. So I just want to make sure. Can everybody see? Can everybody see the slides? I don't know.
Yes.
I'm open. So okay, good. So yeah, as I mentioned, my partner in crime here is Pratik Singh, and he'll be jumping in from time to time to help me out with this. The talk is titled "Don't Be a Ditka," and let me actually just jump right into it, and then I'll kind of talk about our motivation for doing this. Unfortunately, I showed Pratik on the video earlier. This is actually my more favorite picture of him. Everybody can see right there. That's kind of his arm right there. I don't know if you can see. Long story short, for anybody who has to leave early, I know there's a lot of talk in Agile that Agile is all about outcomes over output. What our research has actually kind of shown us or kind of pointed us in the direction that really it's more output over outcomes. And we'll get into more of that, like I said, as the talk goes on. But I know a lot of people like to focus on outcomes, but I mean, strictly speaking, outcomes are really a function of output. And if you want to have good outcomes, you really actually should be focusing on output. But like I said, that should make a little bit more sense as we go through this. So the fundamental question that I have when we start out is, how good, does everybody think you are at estimating value? I mean, and I guess this is kind of more of a rhetorical question. I don't know if we have, a chance for people to jump in, but think about this. I mean, when you're thinking about what you should be working on, just really honestly, how good do you think you are at estimating that value? And honestly, more importantly, when do you typically estimate that value? And the answer to that question is obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but probably we're estimating value up front before we've ever started work on anything. We're making these assessments of value when we have the least amount of information, the greatest amount of uncertainty, and the least amount of information. But as you guys probably figured out, when we get into prioritization, we talk about prioritizing by value. We're making those prioritization decisions. We're making those prioritization assessments at that time when we have the absolute least amount of information. And so that got us thinking, this is not a problem that is unique to software. There are a whole bunch of other industries out there that have to estimate value. And because we're in the United States, I can actually talk about the National Football League. And so let's talk about sports. Sports in particular. How good are we at estimating value versus maybe say how the NFL estimates value? And one way that you guys probably think about how the NFL would estimate value is the draft. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on how the draft works. Hopefully, everybody understands that there is a sports organization out there called the National Football League, and every year that they have a draft. And the point of the draft is that's where teams are able to get together and they're able to decide what players they want to choose to join their teams. Now, in 1999, there was a guy by the name of Mike Ditka. My guess is most people have heard of Mike Ditka. And at the time, he was a head coach of the New Orleans Saints. 14 years earlier, he'd won a Super Bowl with the Chicago Bears, but he had since moved on to coach the New Orleans Saints. And heading into the 1999 draft, Ditka believed that there was one skill position that the Saints needed to fill in order to win a Super Bowl. And that was that they needed a star running back. And going into that draft, the star running back that he thought that he needed was a guy by the name of Ricky Williams. Now this is a cover from ESPN magazine, from that draft. I like to say it's kind of a sign of the times. I'm not sure ESPN would be able to get away with this cover nowadays. Maybe not or whatever. But Mike Ditka believed that Ricky Williams was the player that he needed to win a Super Bowl with the Saints. The problem for Mike Ditka was the order in the 1999 draft was as follows. The Cleveland Browns had the first pick, and I think they've had the first pick every year since. Sorry, Cleveland Brown fans out there. Then the Eagles and the Bengals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The Saints had the number 12 pick in that draft. Going into that draft, Ricky Williams was obviously one of the most highly touted players, and so the chances of Ricky Williams being around for that number 12 pick were actually pretty small. And Mike Ditka knew that. So he needed to do something, and he needed to do something drastic in order to be able to secure that pick. So what he did is he went in and he traded up from the 12th pick to the 5th pick in this first round. In order to do that, what he had to do was he had to give up all of the Saints' other picks, not just in the first round, but all the rounds. So he basically forfeited the whole 1999 draft in order to go from the 12th pick in that first round up to the 5th round. Plus, that wasn't it. Plus, he gave up the 1st and 3rd round picks in next year's draft. So he gave up, I don't know, 8, 9, 10, whatever, however many picks that is, just to get from in the 1999 draft, just to get from the 12th pick to the 5th pick so that he could get the player that he wanted. Now the question is, what was Ditka actually saying by making this trade? Again, this is kind of rhetorical. This obviously works a little bit better when it's a group and it's a presentation. But what he was saying is that Mike Ditka was saying that he was an excellent judge of value, right? He knew that The Saints needed a running back. He knew with certainty that the Saints needed a running back, and more importantly, that the running back that they needed was Ricky Williams. And he was willing to give up all of those other picks in order to make that one thing happen, right? So now the question becomes, well, what about the lean agile space? How does this kind of ring true with how we do things in lean agile? I mean, is this kind of thought process in terms of our confidence in being able to ascertain value, our confidence in being able to understand, the order in which we work on things. How does this translate, very well. And so I guess maybe before I get going, before I get into the meat of the talk, maybe we can pause very quickly and take a look at maybe some of the questions.
Dan, there's one question in Slido.
Yes.
Let's load it up a little bit. Not sure if we're jumping ahead too much, so I'll just read it to you and let you decide.
Thank you.
How can we use actionable metrics to collaboratively involve third parties like software factories not working in an agile way?
Oh yeah. We might have to leave that one toward the end. Mostly because I don't know that I have a good answer for that, but no, because honestly, that's not, I don't know. I have to understand that one a little bit better. I'm not sure that that's directly related to value. It's definitely indirectly related to, I think, some assessment of value. But for this particular talk, I want to talk about the challenges that we face in terms of making prioritization decisions, especially around value. But thanks for the question. I mean, that's a good question. We'll keep that. We'll make sure that we talk about that toward the end. Are there any other questions about maybe upfront assessments of value? Are there any questions there?
We don't have any in Slido. That was the only one so far.
Okay, good. All right. Well, so let me just keep going forward. And so, in terms of some context setting, I'm hoping most of you have heard of the name Don Reinertsen. Everything, I shouldn't say everything, but most everything that I'm going to talk about in this presentation, especially as pertains to things like cost of delay and cost of delay divided by duration, are taken directly from Don Reinertsen. I'm going to try and channel my inner Don as much as possible. So any apologies to him if I misquote or I state things wrong. But he's I would argue he's one of the most influential, if not the most influential person in the lean agile space when it comes to talking about things like cost of delay and and these types of topics. And it's in studying Don Reinertsen, and it's in having conversations with many people who have struggled with this whole value proposition that Pratik and I kind of stumbled on this idea of, well, is the established dogma out there, is that really correct? I mean, are we really setting ourselves up for success? So before we get into this, we are going to assume, number one, that you're in a complex product development domain. And the spoiler alert there is, whether you think you are or not, you are, probably, almost certainly you are, whether you're in software or not or whatever. And the second one, probably even more importantly, is that you wish to optimize or dare we say maximize value in your context. If neither one of these statements apply to you, then you might as well just maybe leave the presentation right now, because the rest of this talk probably won't make any sense. But my guess is, if we were to go around the room and talk to people, that you probably fit one or both of these statements. So the fundamental problem that we're trying to solve here is that we have a limited supply of resources, and I'm using resources in the most generic sense, right? People, time, and money, with which to satisfy the overwhelming demand to deliver value. So our customers' ability to be able to request things of us will always outpace the people that we have to fulfill those requests, the time that we have to fulfill those requests, the money that we have to fulfill those requests, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So now we have to start making decisions around, well, because we've got all of this demand, but we've got this very, very limited supply, how do we go about figuring out if we are going to be able to optimize for value with this problem of scarcity? And some traditional, and fundamentally that means that we're going to have to put in place some type of prioritization, because we can't do everything. We have to prioritize, right? Hopefully I'm not telling you guys anything you don't already know. So some traditional prioritization schemes are things like stack ranking based on value, We've kind of talked about that. Highest paid person's opinion, Eurovision Song Contest or American Idol voting, right? Cost of delay, CD3, which is what this talk is going to be about, and then things like throwing darts, crying, etc. Right? These are all traditional prioritization schemes, one or more that you guys hopefully have heard of or maybe even practiced yourself. The one that we're going to focus on, like I said, for this talk, though, is using things like cost of delay and cost of delay divided by duration. And the reason that we did this is because, especially in the last year, and I don't want to necessarily say because of it, but it's probably because of it, probably because of the rise of SAFE, and it has its own kind of prioritization formula. More on that later, or honestly, probably not so much more on that later, because I'm really not even sure what that means. But there's been a lot of discussion, I think, in the last several years in the Lean Agile space around how do we use things like cost of delay and cost of delay divided by duration in order to make these prioritization decisions. Now, to explain this, and I'm just going to apologize, I'm going to get through this as quickly as possible, and I know that I'm talking very, very fast here, but I'm going to try and talk even faster as I get through this. But there does seem to be a lot of misinformation or even disinformation about what cost of delay is. And so for the rest of the talk to make sense, I really have to just very, very quickly go over the definition again, as Don Reinertsen sees it, in terms of what cost of delay is. And the way that you figure out cost of delay, or the way that you define cost of delay, is let's say that we have a graph much like what I'm showing right here, where we've got time across the x-axis across the bottom and lifetime profit up the side, up the y-axis. What you do with this graph is you plot and you say, let's assume we're starting a feature or a project or a whatever. And let's say that this feature, well, we could wave our magic wand, and this feature was automatically able to be delivered today, right? Well, if we delivered that feature to today, what would be the lifetime profit? What we mean by that is if you were to add up, over the life of the product, cumulatively, if we were to add up all the profit that particular feature or product or whatever would make over its life, how much would that be? And you plot that, on the graph, if I can get that right. So let's say, for example, let's say it's January 1st, and let's say we wave our magic wand and we deliver this feature on January 1st, and let's say we add up all those lifetime profits and it comes out to be 1 million. If we had this thing today, we would get $1 million, right? And we would plot that. Well, okay, so that's for January 1st. Well, what if that thing was delayed by 1 month? And instead of having it on January 1st, it was delivered on February 1st. Obviously, because some time has passed, the amount of money, probably the amount of money that we could make off of that thing would go down, just by the very nature we didn't have as much time where that product was in the marketplace. And so we could do that too. If we added up all the lifetime profit for that thing on February 1st, let's say we got 900,000. And we could do that going forward across the whole timeline that we think that this product might be available. For every month or every day or every week or whatever, we could go and we could plot what we think that lifetime profit would be if the product or feature was delivered on that date. I hope this makes sense because I'm waving my hands a lot. If you do that, Don Reinertsen says you'll get a curve that looks, something like this. Obviously, the lifetime profit curve goes down over time, due to all those delays. If you have this curve, then the cost of delay is defined as, well, let me take a step back. And I'll try to explain this the way that Don explains it. Don would say, the old maxim that time equals money, right? So we've got time equals money. The problem with saying that time equals money is the units on both sides of that equation are different. Time is in time, obviously, and money is in dollars or euro or pounds or whatever. And we could say that a change in time equals a change in money, but this doesn't quite make sense either. We need some way of balancing that equation. And the way that you balance that equation is with, not to get too mathy on you, is with a partial derivative. And that cost of delay is that partial derivative, right? It's the units of money over time or whatever. And graphically, this is probably a much, much better way of presenting that. Graphically, that cost of delay is the slope of that tangent, at any point along that curve. Believe it or not, yes, that partial derivative, that funky thing or whatever, that is what cost of delay is. You may have seen cost of delay defined in other terms. You may have seen it defined in other ways. those things aren't necessarily, at least the way that I understand it, those things aren't cost of delay. This is how cost of delay is traditionally defined. Now, here's the good news. The good news is you really don't need to know any of this math stuff, right? Let's state this in very, very generic terms. But like I said, I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page in terms of what cost of delay is. Cost of delay, just in words, is the amount of decrease in cumulative lifetime profit due to the delay in the introduction of an item. Stated a different way, it's the lifetime profit of an item, or the lifetime profit of an item is dependent on its availability date. And cost of delay is a measure of the rate of that dependency. So what we're saying here is, the longer it takes to get a product to market, obviously the lower the lifetime profits are going to be. Cost of delay is, is that amount of decrease in total cumulative lifetime profit, right, due to intellectual error. The reason most people love to talk about cost of delay is because it gives us an economic framework with which to make these changes. Now it's not just somebody's subjective opinion about, well, I think this thing's more valuable or this thing's more valuable. Hopefully we can bring a little bit more rigor, a little bit more math to this, and we can say that, all other things being equal, value is maximized over the long run by minimizing cost of delay, right? That's the essential thing, right? So I guess maybe I should pause right there. Are there some questions before I get too much further? Are there questions about how I've defined cost of delay right now? I hope not.
There are not any in Slido.
Okay, good. I should qualify this by saying I don't necessarily consider myself an expert in cost of delay. What I've learned in cost of delay was really just by doing some of these simulations and exploring some of these problems. So I'm very interested in other people's opinions about about cost of delay. So let's put this into practice if we can. Just come up with a very, very simple example. Let's say that a project A has cost of delay of 5,000 per week. Project B has a cost of delay of 10,000 per week. Both projects will take exactly the same amount of time to complete. We know that this is probably not the case. That's why there's an asterisk there. We'll talk about the case where they take different amount of time here in just a second. The question is, if we only have capacity to start one now, which one should we choose? Based on what I just told you, the answer to that question is, of course, everybody said project A, right? Well, that's wrong because it's project B, right? We should choose the one with the higher cost of delay, right? The one that we should choose is that one, whichever one has the higher cost of delay. Sounds great, right? This is all one. Well, what if, let's make things a little bit more complicated. What if feature A has a cost of delay of 5,000 per week, but it's going to take 10 weeks to complete? Feature B has a cost of delay of 5,000 per week, but it's going to take only 5 weeks to complete. And feature C has a cost of delay of 10,000 per week, and it's going to take 5 weeks to complete. So now we've got different projects with different costs of delay and different durations in order to get those things done. Now, how do we decide which one of those to complete? Well, one of the ways that we can figure that out is by plotting what's known as delay cost. And I'm going to apologize for the confusion in terms here. Cost of delay is what I just showed you before. Delay cost is what I'm going to be showing you right now. Those are actually two different things. If you plot cost of delay versus time, or time versus cost of delay like I've got here, what we can say for project A, remember project A was going to take 10 weeks to complete, and it had a $5,000 cost of delay, right? And then we can draw a rectangle, around those units, right? We can do this, so we can say that the total delay cost then is cost of delay times the amount of time that it's going to take to get done, and that's $50,000. We can do the same thing for B, right? Remember, B had a duration of 5 weeks, but a cost of delay of $5,000. And here we get a total delay cost of $25,000. Of course, we can do the same thing for C, but I'm hoping you guys get the picture. If you can only work on one at a time, one feature at a time, how do we know how we're going to minimize the total delay cost? Well, the way that we would do that pictorially is we would want to find out a sequencing that minimizes that total area under the curve, if you will. So if we choose A, B, and C, let me go back. If we choose to do, you know, project A, then project B, then project C, of course, when we start A, we are incurring, while we're doing A, we're incurring the cost of delay or delay cost of project B. We're also incurring for C, right? Well, then when A gets done, we can start B, but then we're still incurring cost for C. And then, of course, when C gets done, then we're done with everything. So we can see that the total delay cost will be that total area under that curve based on that sequencing. I'm hoping this is making sense. Like I said, this is much easier to do in person. So the idea is to choose a sequencing that minimizes that area under the curve. We can sit and we can play around with rectangles, but I'm just going to fast forward to give you guys the answer. The right answer here is actually to do C, A, and B, where the total delay cost is that. If we compare the two, A, B, and C, and C, B, A, you can see where CBA is a much smaller area under the curve, and so that would be the right sequence that would minimize that total delay cost. The shortcut to doing all that, like I said, instead of just playing around with rectangles all day, the shortcut to do that is to use something called cost of delay divided by duration. And all you do is very, very simple. You take the cost of delay, as the name implies, you take the cost of delay and then you just divide it by duration. And so for feature A, you see you get an answer of $500 per week squared. Don't even get me started on units, by the way. That's another bone I have to pick with cost of delay divided by our CD3. But let's just ignore units for right now. Feature B has 1,000 and feature C is 2,000. So what you do with CD3 is you find the feature with the largest CD3, and then you work the items in that descending order. So you can see by doing CD3, we would get the same answer. You do feature C, then feature B, then feature A. It gives us the exact same answer as we did as if we were figuring out that total delay cost, right? Make sense? Questions about that? I see a question here. This seems to be standard SAFE, weighted shortest job first. Actually, believe it or not, it's not. At least not the way that I understand SAFE. SAFE does something, I believe, with story points and something else. Remember, cost of delay is always measured in terms of money per time. It's always money per time. If you see, and this is from Don Reinertson, if you see cost of delay stated in any other terms, that's not money. It could be story points per time or story points per dollar or whatever. That's not cost of delay. It might be something else, and that might be a useful metric, but that's not cost of delay. So that's just, I just want to make sure that's clear, which is why sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, I interrupted. Do you want to finish that?
No, go ahead. I was just babbling.
There's there's two questions in Slido that might be good to hit here. One is, why not a vertical slice of all three, right? Of what you have on your feature A, feature B, feature C here.
Yeah.
And then the other question is cost of delay done at story point level? Is
cost of delay
done at a story point level?
Yeah. Hopefully, I think I just answered the story point one. Mm-hmm. That story points themselves never enter into the cost of delay equation. It's always money per time, and that time is always measured in terms of duration. In terms of like real time, right? Days or weeks or months. So yeah, story points never enter into the equation. The first one, why not a thin slice of all of them? Believe it or not, that's really actually the answer. But we're jumping again. I just spoiled the punchline for you guys, or whoever asked that actually just spoiled the punchline. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in just a second. Are there any other questions out there?
Yeah, and I don't think that apply to this particular point in the conversation.
Okay, great. Right. So if you guys were able to follow my mathematical babbling, hopefully this all makes sense. And you're like, what? This sounds wonderful. I mean, this is a solution to all of our problems. So what's the problem? And I'm going to suggest there are at least three problems. There are probably more, but there are at least three problems with cost of delay and sequencing, prioritization. Remember, by the way, I'm going to use prioritization and sequencing essentially synonymously. Obviously, if I do a sequence of C, B, A, that means I prioritized C over B and B over A, right? So sequencing and prioritization in my mind are roughly similar. So at least there are problems with that sequencing or that prioritization that I just talked about. We're assuming three things, whether you guys knew it or not. We're assuming three things. We're assuming, number one, value is deterministic. That means that we know value up front. And so whatever value was when we did that CD3 calculation, that is absolutely going to be the value that is delivered or that is realized once the feature is delivered. Same thing with duration. We said duration is deterministic, right? We estimated that this thing was going to take 10 weeks, and guess what? It took exactly 10 weeks. And number three, again, no new options showed up. So in that whole time that we were doing feature C, then feature B, then feature A, no new options showed up. Because if a new option showed up, we'd have to redo all of our calculations and redo all of our sequencing. Those are three fundamental problems, and the thing is, here's the thing: none of those, all of those assumptions are wrong, but none of them are fatal. We can actually overcome each one of those individually. Taken together, though, they become extremely problematic. So let's maybe go through and say, well, what if we modeled some of these assumptions? What might we get? And by the way, for this simulation, we're going to run a Monte Carlo simulation in the background. If you guys don't know what Monte Carlo, I hope everybody knows what Monte Carlo simulation is. If you don't, we can maybe very quickly go over that at the end. But in order to set up the simulation, what we're going to say is we have projects that last anywhere between 0 and 20 weeks. All the projects in our backlog are going to last anywhere between 0 and 20 weeks. Every project can bring in anywhere from $0 to $10,000. So, no projects are actually going to lose money, which is obviously not realistic, but we can talk about that too. New projects are going to show up every 2 weeks. And we're going to run this portfolio of projects over 40 weeks, and we're going to figure out how much money we've made. Okay, so does that make sense? We've got a whole bunch of projects of varying size, a whole bunch of projects of varying value. We've got new projects that are showing up as we're working on things. We're going to try and figure out over 40 weeks which prioritization scheme is going to give us the most value, generate the most revenue, right? And we're going to choose 3 prioritization schemes. We're going to prioritize based on CD3, as I just talked about. We're going to prioritize on duration, and then we're actually just going to randomly choose stuff, okay? So the first run of the simulation we're going to do, it's a perfect world where we know value up front, we know duration up front, and we don't have any options that show up. Yeah, apparently I lied about something. I'm not really sure what I lied about. I'm sure everything that I talked about, I lied. But anyway, in this perfect world where we know everything, this is kind of the summary of value. And I know that this table is a little bit confusing. So really what it's telling us is CD3 is, is this first column here. And in this perfect world where we know value, we know duration, and no new projects show up, what this is saying is, as we would expect, CD3 beats all other algorithms. And to me, this would make sense, right? Because hopefully everything that we just explained before, that was CD3, and it should make sense. Okay, we don't need to know that, okay? Oh, this is Pratik's slide, right? One of the greatest quotes by one of the greatest thinkers of all time. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Well, remember, we just said all 3 of those assumptions are wrong. So let's talk about what happens when all 3 of these assumptions we change all 3 of these assumptions, where we don't know value up front, where we don't know duration up front. What this will tell us then is that on average, cost of delay divided by duration actually underperforms duration. So if you were to prioritize based on duration, based on your understanding of duration from shortest to longest, I guess, duration would actually outperform CD3. So remember, we're in this world where we don't, value is random, duration is random, and new projects are showing up. In that world, it's actually better to prioritize based on duration and not CD3. Duration actually gives you a better answer. But it turns out we can do even better than that. We can do something that something that Pratik and I advocate for quite a bit, and this is the idea of right sizing. So if you think a project is going to be larger than a given size, for example, we don't want any projects in our portfolio to take longer than 5 weeks, just for example, then what you do is you break it up into multiple independent projects. Hopefully each one of those smaller ones that can realize value in their own right. And this is where whoever was suggesting before, why don't we do a thin slice of all of them? This is kind of essentially what we're saying is, yeah, you want to right size your projects. You don't want to necessarily say, we have a project that's coming into our portfolio and we think it's going to take 18 weeks. If most of the projects in our portfolio take 5 weeks or less, the last thing we want to do is let an 18-month project into our portfolio. So what we would say is, let's right size that. Let's break that up. In the world where we're able to actually right size, and again, we run the Monte Carlo simulation using the parameters that I just said. We can go over details of that. Oh, I should mention, I think I have a link to it, but if anybody wants to know where the data for this stuff comes from, where the mechanics of this, we actually published a paper. Well, it's a glamorized blog post that I'd be happy to send the link out to everybody so that you can see just exactly how all this works. But if you right size, then what you find out is, in this simulation anyway, is that right sizing, just right sizing, if you're to choose one thing, just right sizing your projects or your features will outperform CD3 without right sizing by a whopping 182%. So the point is, if you're going to make one intervention, if you're trying to prioritize and you want to make one intervention, the intervention that you should make is to right size your projects. At the point where we're right sizing, where you've decided this is about roughly the range of the size of projects that we think should be in our portfolio, once you do that, then honestly, it doesn't matter. The prioritization scheme that you want to choose just does not matter. You can use CD3, you can use random, you can use whatever. It simply doesn't matter. And the reason that this is so striking, in my opinion, is remember all that fancy cost of delay calculation stuff that I showed you up front? That's actually really, really, really hard to do, if not impossible in a lot of contexts. And what this result is telling us is you don't even necessarily have to do that. You don't even necessarily have to know how to do that. You could, as long as you're right sizing, you could randomly just randomly sequence your projects, and you will do just as good a job at optimizing your value over the long term. That's essentially the case of this stuff. So remember, we're in this world where when we're assessing value up front, we're making a guess. We don't know, right? We don't know how much value this thing is going to be. We won't know until we put it in the hands of our customers. And then once our customers get it, they might have a very, 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 very different view of value than we do. Same thing with duration. I mean, how many times have you started a project or you started a feature and you're like, oh, wow, this is really, really easy. I'm going to get it done in a couple of days or a couple of weeks. And 20 months later, you're still working on it, right? So we don't know duration up front either. And of course, always more new projects are showing up into our portfolio. Remember, we've always got customers requesting things. We've always got product owners coming in with good ideas of how to do stuff. So in this world where we don't know value and we don't know duration and we've constantly got new things showing up, it turns out that the best algorithm, if you will, the best sequencing, the best prioritizing algorithm has nothing to do with sequencing at all. Right? It has to do with let's right size those items in our backlog, and then we can really honestly just choose them at random. And it's really about getting that stuff into our hand of our customers, as much stuff in the hands of our customers as quickly as possible, so that we can validate that value and make changes and make better decisions based on that. Yeah, so essentially throw darts. Let me, I guess let me pause there because I've thrown a lot. That's really the kind of the crux of the paper. Are there any questions about?
So there's a few. So one of them is, so how did that turn out for Mike Ditka and the Saints?
It's funny actually, I don't know if I have slides on that. So the first one is, so for those of you who don't know, Mike Ditka, yeah, he bet pretty much everything on Ricky Williams. Ricky Williams had an okay but not great season in 1999 and 2000. The Saints actually missed the playoffs, and the very next year, Mike Ditka got fired.
That's a very scary tale.
But that's the thing. I mean, again, how many times do you have product owners coming to you or customers coming to you and saying, hey, if you only did this, this is going to be worth so much value. I don't know that I've ever seen a business case presented that shows a project losing money. I don't know if but yet, I mean, you can't tell me that every project that you've ever worked on in your life has actually made money. So anyway.
I suspect too, like when you're doing the work of breaking the work down to be small, you end up vetting it a lot more than when you're just trying to estimate the value at the end.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
weed out those bad, not only do you make it small enough to kind of test your hypothesis, but you weed out bad ideas.
Yeah, you hear this a lot, that Agile is really about maximizing the work not done. Now that's a gross oversimplification, of course, but the sentiment is accurate, right? I mean, we want to do as small things as possible and get them in the hands of our customers, because our customers will be able to tell us what's right and what's wrong. Yeah. We don't want to spend 20 weeks working on something that has no value. That makes no sense.
So there's a question, I feel like you answered it, but just in the event there's anything you wanted to add, it's, we all understand outcomes are important, but does that happen without output? So when is output important?
That's, I mean, I guess that's the fundamental thesis of this talk, is outcomes are obviously a function of output. And so that's why, again, based on the numbers that we've run, the best way to maximize outcomes over the long term is to get as many small outputs as possible in the short term, right? I mean, so because we always want to be able to learn, we always want to be able to assess value, we always want to be able to course correct based on the information we get by actually putting things into the hands of our customers. So that I guess that's the point, is the way that you achieve outcomes is by output. And it's most people want to focus on outcomes up front. And I think that's admirable, but I think it's misplaced energy. The really way to maximize outcomes is to optimize for output. Again, that's just our take on this right now.
Last question that's in Slido is, do you have this in your actionable Agile metrics?
No. No, short answer is no. There's I don't want to promise. I've got a third book kind of kicking around in my head, and the article that I posted on Medium, or that I should say, I keep saying Pratik was very, very, very much fundamental in making this happen. So I apologize if I haven't been giving him the right attribution. I'm only saying that because we're live. When we're behind closed doors, I wouldn't give him attribution of all, of course. But the article that was published on Medium is actually a sneak peek. It's a chapter of the next book that I'm writing. So I don't have it published other than what's in Medium, and we don't have it as part of the Actionable Agile tool as of yet, unfortunately. But you can imagine a lot of people are asking about how do we do better, more effective portfolio planning, portfolio tracking, portfolio things. Ultimate Software is one of those companies, which is why we've spent so much time trying to figure out what the right thing to do is there. So sorry, no. Short answer is no.
But hang around a little bit. And then...
Hopefully, fingers crossed. Yeah.
Very cool. That was all the questions on Slido. I actually have a personal question for you.
Sure,
did you have instinctually, did you feel like this is how it would play out? Like going into doing the math and analysis that you did you kind of feel like this would be the outcome?
Kind of. I was gonna say yes, but kind of, yeah. Because like I said, I've been reading Don's work for many years, and I never really thought that anyone ever put this into practice until I started my own product company, which many of you know is Actionable Agile, and I was essentially the product owner, you know, on our team when we were building Actionable Agile. And I mean, it could have been, and this is the reason why I was hedging my bets, is because it could have been that I'm just a terrible product owner. In fact, that's probably the most likely thesis. But it seemed like everything that I thought was really valuable for the Actionable Agile product turned out not to be very valuable. And the stuff that I didn't think was valuable at all was the stuff that our customers loved. And I was just at every turn, I was just so bad, just completely bad at assessing value up front. And so honestly, that's really what got me thinking about this was, while I could have been really bad, I'm like, I can't be wrong all of the time. And it occurred to me one day that, yeah, I'm trying to make these assessments of value when I have the least amount of information. I mean, it's just my hypothesis, it's just my theory. And most of the times I was just wrong, which gets me to, this is probably one of my favorite quotes about this whole thing. Hopefully everybody can still see my screen is, you know, when talking about prioritization schemes, you know, nobody's ever going to sit there and say, oh, well, we're prioritizing to make the least amount of money, right? Everybody thinks they have a winning strategy. But the greatest risk, the real risk, is thinking you have a winning strategy when in fact you have a losing one. This is from Annie Duke, the book Thinking in Bets. And this quote resonated with me and is really kind of one of my our biggest inspirations for doing this.
Very cool.
Other questions? I talked really fast.
You did talk fast. I know I did. It took like it was like 40 minutes at Lean Agile US, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So. I guess it's more because, yeah, I usually build in time to answer more questions. But
we don't have, we have a couple comments in Slido, but they're not really questions. It looks like maybe a couple more coming in. I'm wondering if we want to just kind of open the floor.
I'm just kind of there. I guess there's stuff coming up on chat.
Mm-hmm. Where can I find a tool to run a simulation like this?
Short answer is I don't know. We and this is where I hold my breath a little bit because Pratik for the most part coded this simulation. We built our own simulation from scratch. If anybody knows of a tool, I'd love to see it. If somebody can share it with us and post it, I'd love to be able to see it. But we built our literally from scratch. We built our own tool to be able to do this. But looking at comments, what do you have?
When we did Monte Carlo simulations in college, we did them in Excel. So I think there's an add-on or something for Excel that does Monte Carlo simulations. In case anyone's wondering, I did it so long ago that I don't know like how to work it, but that might be a good starting place.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you can definitely do it in Excel. It takes powers greater than mine to be able to. I sat down and tried it for about 20 minutes in Excel, curled up in a fetal position in the corner, and then asked Pratik to build a simulation for me. So, but yes, I'd be surprised if you could not do it in Excel. Sorry, guys.
Well, I was going to say that arenas or other broader process simulation tools might be useful. We haven't tried that. We tried C#, but
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and along those lines, I mean, I'd love for people, you know, if you can go read the article on Medium, you know, I'd love for people to kind of test this, build it yourself, and you know, see if you can reproduce the results or not reproduce the results. We've had some conversations on some Slack groups about people who have tried to recreate this, and you know, this is, like I said, this is based on our exploration with you know, the kind of the numbers that we're seeing here at Ultimate Software. these are the conclusions we're drawing. I'd love to see if if these results can be extrapolated to different scenarios, different industries, different whatever.
Cool. There's a couple more questions that came in on Slido. I'll read them. Let's see. It seems you still need to make a call on which things to do, as there's never enough capacity. If duration is the only thing that matters, how do you choose?
Yeah, I guess that's. I mean, so one thing I guess I want to make things clear. If you have information about value up front, and there's some very classic examples of that. So, like for example, if you work in a highly regulated environment, and the government passes a law that says if you don't have this compliance artifact in your tool, you're going to get fined X amount of dollars. Or let's say you signed a contract that says you have to deliver this feature by this date or you're going to lose this amount of money. Well, obviously that's information about value that should be incorporated in the conversation, the prioritization conversation. I don't want to say ignore that information. Of course, if you have that information, use it. Other than that, what decisions should you make? That's the whole point. Is I don't know that it really matters. At that point, it's really your best guess based on information that you've got earlier. As long as you're right sizing your stuff, you're making your things as small as possible and working them through the process as quickly as possible. If you're doing that, it really doesn't matter what criteria you use. It just doesn't matter. But again, based on our simulation, it just doesn't matter.
It's funny because each time you answer several questions at the same time.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's good. Well, they're all slightly related, so it's kind of hard. But anybody from Coaching Agile Journeys, did you have any last minute questions or comments for Danny?
I have one. So I guess it's like the value of focusing sequentially on stuff versus working on, like, say, 3 streams at a time. So if you just have one team, I mean, my assumption would be it's better to work on just one thing at a time and get it out and get feedback on it rather than dragging all 3 of the projects along for a much longer period of time. So are you still advocating that focus?
The short answer is yes. The longer answer is not so sure. And it's funny that you ask that because for the past couple of weeks, Pratik and I have been working on exactly that problem. Is what is that optimal work in progress, right? I mean, is it really one thing at a time? Is it 2 things at a time? Obviously, it's context specific, but is there a way that we could algorithmically figure out what that right work in progress is? And we don't have a good answer yet, but our belief is still, yes, generally speaking, smaller is better, and especially making the things that you're working on as small as possible. That's potentially, this spoiler alert, making the things that you're working on as small as possible is potentially more important than the actual WIP number that you choose. But we don't have any anything definitive on that just yet.
Great, thanks.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Sorry, I was going to say it's kind of been surprising us of late because our coaching strategy has always been work on as few things as possible to get them done. And we've been playing with more simulations like the ones that Dan showed you already, which seem to show what Dan was just saying, that right sizing and making, in fact, even beyond right sizing, small sizing, making things as small as possible seem to have even greater effect than working on just one thing at a time. And again, no definitive answers yet, but hopefully soon.
Right. Yeah, I guess my assumption there was you can't get feedback on something and know how it's landing in the market or even earn money from it until it's out there.
Absolutely.
100%. Exactly right. Yep.
Wow. This is awesome. Thank you.
Well, okay. So if I could, I don't know if we get invited back, but just to finish up, just very, very quickly, a lot of what we talk about is counterintuitive. This is one of our favorite slides to kind of show this. If we were to ask somebody which table is longer and thinner, when you look at this picture, most people would say the one on the left. But if you believe me, and I tell you that we're actually not manipulating the image at all, what you will see is those tables are actually of exactly the same size. And so what we scratched on the surface here today is kind of some of the fundamental problems with just empiricism in general. Gaining knowledge through observation and measurement. I know a lot of agile process is based on empiricism. But of course, humans are fallible. We bring our own biases. We bring our own filters when we look at the world. And so that's kind of where Pratik and I have focused a lot of our energy recently, is trying to understand, where those biases, are, and how they affect our ability to behave empirically, I guess I should say. So that's why, if we get invited back, I don't know if we will. And I don't know if this will be the title of the talk, but, you can come to this next year for why you should date an organ donor. So if it's okay, that's why I had two shameless plugs. Number one, Lean Agile US, the best conference in the world, of course, happens every year in South Florida at the end of February. So next year is February 25th and 26th in Fort Lauderdale. Come on, February in Florida. I don't think there's a better place in the world to be. So please, if you guys haven't been here, please do. If anybody wants to learn more about just right sizing and batches and work in progress and how they work in agile processes in general, and you happen to be in South Florida area at the end of September, we're actually running a professional Scrum with Kanban class that kind of talks about some of these concepts. At the end of September, also in, well, it might actually be in Palm Springs, but or Boca Raton. But anyway, that's that. If anybody wants to, there's some books. When Will It Be Done? Two books written by the world's best author on these topics. The book When Will It Be Done? Actual Agile Metrics for Predictability. There's the Ultimate Kanban Case Study in InfoQ. I'll send out that link for the Medium article that Pratik and I wrote up as well. And, of course, I just want to say thanks, everybody. I mean, I know you're taking an hour out of lunch on a Monday, no less. So everybody showed up on a Monday. So I hope everybody enjoyed this. I hope you guys maybe learned a little something. Maybe we've piqued some interest on some of these topics. So
thank you so much.
Thanks very much.
This was really great. Actually, Monday was the day that people, we thought Monday was not great, but in a survey, people responded that Monday was good. So we took action on that.
See, there you go. We don't know value up front, right? That's just just proved it. Drop the mic.
Right. Dan, you wanted to hang on. I guess we can stop the recording now.
Okay.
Not stopped yet. You said you wanted to hang on and do a little retro.